Hey, welcome back, podcast friends. And today we have another interview, and we've actually interviewed Casey before, but he's such an awesome person. We really wanted to bring him back. And we just met at a conference again, which we were met the first time, and got talking and said, okay, it's time for another podcast. So our guest today is Casey Ruff. He's been a certified personal trainer since 2007. He successfully ran a metabolic testing program for a large gym and oversaw 13 programs in the West region. He has multiple certifications as a personal trainer, lifestyle coach, and performance enhancement specialist. With his nutrition coaching certification, he specializes in low carbohydrate lifestyles, including ketogenic and carnivore diets. He's helped thousands of clients over 17 years learn how to achieve the best lifestyle through movement, lifestyle management, and proper diet. Together with Bethany, they created Boundless Body LLC during the 2020 pandemic. He's the host. He is the host of two podcasts, Boundless Body Radio, which has over 500,000 downloads, which is absolutely amazing. Congratulations. Yeah, that's crazy.
I know. That's awesome.
And the How to Make a podcast. He lives in South Jordan, Utah with his wife, Bethany, and their two dogs, Rex and Tucker, and their cat, Lily. In his free time, he loves to cycle, play hockey, and paddleboard. So welcome once again, Casey. It's wonderful having you on here.
Thank you so much. It's great to visit with you guys again. If you'd have just ended that the first sentence by saying Casey is awesome, I already would have thought you were exaggerating. Appreciate the kind words.
No, you are awesome. We've been looking forward to this. This is going to be great.
Yeah.
Thanks. So we just recently hosted you on our show, and we've gotten so much positive feedback, you guys. I've gotten comments from friends and family, a lot of YouTube comments, deep diving into some of the medications that we talked about and how they're not taken without impunity. I thought was a fabulous conversation. It's been really helpful for people out there. So thank you for that. It was good.
Yeah. Thanks for allowing me to do that. People just don't really think about the multiple adverse effects that every single drug has. I mean, there's not a medication out there that doesn't have multiple adverse effects. And some of them, like we were talking about with those Ozempics and statins and all those have well over 50, 60 adverse effects. So,
oh my goodness.
Yeah, I'm glad to get the word out to people to make sure you look at all the adverse effects of these medications that they're putting you on, and the crazy thing is almost every one of them you can totally do without if you just gave your body the nutrients it needs. I mean, that's all you got to do.
People need to know that. Yeah, it's really sad.
Yeah. So I know that's what somewhere we heard here recently. Someone was talking about human beings are the only animals on the whole planet that have to be told what to eat. Every single other animal knows. And we've known up until our dietary guidelines came out in 1977 when they started lying to us about everything. Yep. And now everybody's all mixed up. They don't even know what proper nutrition is.
Yeah.
But
no, I agree. I'll steal this one similar from Ben Azadi, whether he came up with it or not, I'm not sure, but he told me humans are the only animals smart enough to make their own food and dumb enough to eat it.
That's right. I love that. Okay, we're gonna put these together. we'll have a podcast of quips.
There you go. Good. I love it.
Yeah, I think whenever he was reading the intro for you, I didn't realize you had been doing this for 17 years. You just don't quite look old enough. I've been doing it for that long.
Yeah, it was the funniest little stopgap. I had been working at a bike shop, and I was going to school and studying architecture of all things. And it was an off season for cycling, and we joined a big corporate gym that had just opened in my area. It was quite expensive, but decided it'd be worth it to have a place to train in the wintertime. And this is the winter of 2007. And I started watching the personal trainers and what they were doing and how they were interacting with their clients and giving them exercises. And also they were pretty progressive as far as using heart rate monitors at the time, which I had used growing up with my cycle training. And, eventually I went into the manager's office and asked what I had to do to be a trainer. And he told me the certification to go get, and they brought me on staff eventually after I passed my test. And that was March of 2007. And already I knew more about like heart rate kind of stuff than anybody on staff, but it was never intended, in my opinion, to be like a career or something I would do for as long as I have. Mm-hmm. I thought I would do it for a little while and, change careers or go back to architecture, and it just year after year kind of rolled on, and that's what I kept doing, and here we are.
Yeah.
What made it keep rolling on was the fact that you found out how many people really don't know anything about nutrition or what?
Yeah.
But yours was more on the physical training.
Yes, I started as a personal trainer. I mean, I had been certified in like helping people with bike stuff, like bike fits, and along with the cycling I was doing, I attended seminars to talk about nutrition, and I'd always been into fitness and nutrition. I worked at a gym when I was in high school, and I'd always been kind of interested in that kind of thing. But yeah, in the beginning, it really was more along the lines of the physical side of things. And then I also got involved with using what is called a metabolic cart, which is a tool basically that's it's kind of an analyzing box that's hooked up to a laptop that then via an umbilical cord connects up to a mask that somebody is wearing. If somebody's listening may have seen ever like a VO2 test where an athlete is getting tested, or maybe like a Gatorade commercial where it looks like they're going quite hard, and they're breathing into this mask that's analyzing them and giving them something called VO2 max. They put me, they got me certified to do that, and eventually made me in charge of that program. And that's a program that you mentioned I eventually oversaw in the West region for this company. So I was traveling around to different gyms and not only doing these assessments, also helping other trainers analyze results and do the assessments themselves and train them up on that. So that journey ended up becoming it was quite interesting to get. We didn't understand a lot of the results and how that related to nutrition in the beginning. That came much later, like you said. But yeah, I enjoyed, if nothing else, just I got to work with the same people, a lot of the same clients I started with. I still am training today, all these years later. And, you get to know people at a very, very deep level. And yeah, just kind of kept going with it. And thought that whatever we were giving people with conventional advice would help them, and it didn't really help that many people. And so I just thought, most of these people suck at following this advice that we're giving them without realizing like, oh, we're probably giving the wrong advice. But that came much later.
Yeah. So how did that come about? The wrong, like, how did you figure out the wrong advice?
Yeah, great question.
No, go ahead.
Okay, so early on, for example, like we were using these metabolic carts to determine metabolism, which think of it as like how many calories your body is burning, how much oxygen you're using, and how much you're breathing out is essentially telling me how many calories you burn. And so, for example, we had a resting version of the test where you would come in, usually in the morning. I'd put you in a dark office, a comfortable chair, and you just lean back and breathe into this machine for 20 or 30 minutes. I'd analyze the data and then extrapolate the data to 24 hours to show you on a normal day, just being yourself, how many calories you naturally burn. Back then, it was like you would use little sliders on the software to say like, okay, what's your lifestyle as far as activity level? Okay, you work an office job. Do you do any exercise? How many calories a day do you burn during exercise? Okay, you burn on average 500 calories every day doing exercise. And then you do sliders on the other side to say like, okay, what are your goals? Oh, you want to lose weight. Okay, well, if you want to lose weight, we can lose weight at 1 pound a week or 2 pounds a week. And so we'll slide the exercise needs to go higher and the food that you eat needs to go lower. And if you get the numbers right, we could have somebody losing 2 pounds a week by having them have a combination of making a delta of 1,000 calories a day. So whether they were working out a lot more, eating a lot less, or some combination of the two would create a deficit of 1,000 calories. If you did that for 7 days, that would be 7,000 calories, which is 2 pounds of fat. Ironically, a pound of fat is 3,500 calories. And we'd send people away and tell them to go count their calories and, eat the standard stuff, the fruits and vegetables and the grains and all that stuff. And people would not be able to lose weight at that rate over time. They would do okay in the beginning, but that rate would kind of slow down and slow down and slow down. They would stop losing, what the computer told us according to this formula that they should be losing. That wouldn't happen over time. And so we would just think to ourselves like, oh, look at these lazy people. Like, sure, they had some motivation in the beginning, but they're not doing a very good job counting their calories. Maybe they're doing their exercise wrong. They're not doing a very good job following the advice. And that's kind of all we knew. We did know for sure pretty early on that if you did a diet that was too calorie restricted and you were exercising a lot and it was too much, that you would eventually drop your metabolic rate. So one of the best examples, this was probably 2010. I ended up doing a test on a woman who had just gotten booted from The Biggest Loser show, and she wanted to measure her baseline metabolism. And, we hooked her up and did the test. And based on her age, height, weight, and gender, the average number we should have seen for her baseline metabolism was about 2,000 calories. And I measured her physically at about 1,000 calories. So by doing 6 hours of exercise a day and eating 1,200 calories a day, she had dropped her own innate potential to burn calories on her own, which is terrible. And it's why when somebody does a calorie restricted diet and combine it with a lot of exercise, it's funny, but it's actually causing the weight gain that's eventually going to happen. That's how you do that, is you make somebody be more efficient with their calories, or sounds good. But if you're trying to lose weight, that's the last thing you want to be, as efficient. And that's what happened to this woman. She gained all her weight back, like a lot of the other contestants of The Biggest Loser. So that was one thing that we knew in the beginning. Later on, doing these tests, again, I was doing cycling, and so I was really concerned about my cycling performance. And you learn that, when you're cycling at really high levels, you're burning more carbohydrate as your fuel source. Fat should only really be burned at lower intensities when you're not doing that much. And so, you burn a lot of sugar. And the problem is your body only stores such a tiny, tiny, tiny amount of sugar. You store some in the muscles. You've got about a teaspoon circulating in the blood. You've got some in the liver, but that eventually runs out for people. And so I knew that if I was doing a competition or doing a hard ride or whatever, I had about an hour and a half, maybe 2 hours before I would bonk, is what we call it. You hit the wall. Going too hard, too long, you run out of all those sugar calories, and now you have no more energy, just like a car running out of gas. And so our solution, everything we're told, is, well, you top off the tank first. So make sure that you're eating pasta the night before, lots of oatmeal and bananas the morning of. And then during the event, you're constantly trying to eat and eat and eat most of the carbohydrates, the goo, the gels, the bars, if you ate those, the water bottles filled with sugar water. And that was the only way you could kind of stay topped off on the sugar, which would postpone that bonk. But then also your stomach would be hurting the whole time. And, it wasn't very pleasant. It wasn't very practical, because you only have like jersey pockets where you stick stuff in the back of your shirts, and you only have so much room. So, it involved like a lot of stops at gas stations to buy cookies and whatever to stay topped off. And it was 2012 that we were doing a consultation with a guy who didn't work for our company, who is saying that he was getting his people onto better training plans, but also worrying about the diet and getting his athletes to burn higher and higher and higher amounts of fat and minimize the amount of energy that people are using from carbohydrates. And so he was telling us that his athletes were eating things like butter and bacon and cream, and they were like high-end Ironman athletes, and they were eating very little for these competitions that would be hours and hours long and competing at the highest levels. And I was like, what is this dude talking about? That is so strange. And so I remember that was a time that like fat was making it back into my diet personally. It could have been a salad with a little bit more olive oil. I started buying avocados. And yeah, that's when the more of the journey of like, how is nutrition really affecting us and how we burn our calories? How are those two things linked? And is that the bigger focus? Maybe we should focus more on that than we're focusing on like exercising and telling people to burn so many calories and do all these workouts all the time. Maybe we can do something on the nutrition end to get much better results, which turned out to be the case in my experience.
Oh, definitely. So what did you mainly change because you saw this one person and you wanted to see how it did with you, or did you start paying more attention and find out that a lot of people are having these same results where if they had a diet mostly of carbohydrates, they weren't doing as well, but if they did one more protein and fat,
great question.
They did.
Yeah, great question. In the beginning, it started with me. Obviously, I wanted to see if that would help improve myself and my own endurance. And yeah, very soon it was like, oh, I can go ride 2 hours, and if I don't bring food or a bottle with me, I'm okay. So that was, I mean, if nothing else, that was just nice. And then, yeah, you wanted to try it on other people. And it's like, again, the big thing you see, especially like endurance athletes, is they like to work out at heart rate ranges that are really, really high because it feels like they get a really good workout. This is true really of anybody. I see this a lot with even just standard, people that want to lose weight or whatever. You start a running program and now you're huffing and puffing and mouth breathing and trying to burn as many calories as you can. Those activities are what we call glycolytic. They use carbohydrates as the energy source. And so they don't end up helping people as much as people think as far as burning fat. And so with the training, we try to bring people down to work out at zones that are a little bit lower and less intense. That can certainly help as well. But yeah, it was, we would coach people and give people training programs of how to keep your heart rate lower and do these lower intensities. We would be doing these metabolic assessments to verify that they were working. And so, if your target heart rate was 130, maybe this month you could only do a run at maybe 4.5 miles an hour. But if you trained the right way, maybe next time we did the test in a few months, your heart rate would be 130, but maybe you could be running at 5 miles an hour, meaning your body's not working any harder, but you're going physically faster. So
Right.
that would be really good. And then, yeah, over time, learning that with the diet, you can manipulate not only the substrate, utilization. So increasing people's amount of fat that they burn and decreasing the amount of sugar that they burn. So their workouts and really their entire life are more in line with what their actual goals were. That was just a huge revelation. And it wasn't until very later on that I started to find low carbohydrate diets. And the interesting thing there was not only would those people burn lots of fat while they were exercising, but they'd be burning tons of fat while they were resting. And their metabolic rates would not be in line anymore with the averages of where they should be. So somebody would not be eating as many calories from carbohydrates, but their metabolic rate might be a few hundred calories higher than it should have been, which was like, why is your metabolism going up when your calories are about the same? You're just changing where you're getting those calories from, but now your body's burning more energy on its own. That's a little weird. And especially it really happened when people started doing more intermittent fasting. I'll never forget this. One guy came in, his metabolic rate should have been about 2000. We measured him. He just started doing intermittent fasting a few weeks before, feeling great, less hungry, eating, I think, once a day. His metabolic rate, that should have been 2000, came back at 2600 calories. And I was like, holy smokes, dude, like you're burning 600 calories more every single day. We don't want this. Like, this is good. We don't want this to stop. Like, you'll lose fat really well when you're on this, but that just means your minimum calorie intake minimum should be that metabolic rate. We don't want that to come down, which is all we knew at the time. So you need to eat at least 2600 calories. And he like looked at me and he was like, well, 2600 calories. I can't eat 2600 calories. Like, I can if you want me to go back to donuts and soda.
Right.
Like, then I can. But now I'm eating different foods. Like, I get way too full. I could drink like olive oil if you want me to. And I was like, well, that doesn't really make a lot of sense to me either. And that led to the understanding of what fasting does in the body and how that can increase metabolic rate. And I'm like seeing this on my computer screens, dealing with people who are following the opposite of the advice that I told them to do for years, and they're losing fat and they're happy and healthy, and weird things are happening in their health that they're trying to describe. I'm like, that has anything to do with nutrition? I don't know about that. It was just wonderful to learn about it. And that's what eventually led me to, low carb, keto, eventually carnivore, like all these different weird diets that people are doing and are seemingly like getting as healthy as they've ever been in their lives by doing the exact opposite of what we've been told to tell people.
Right.
So it's just captivating. The whole thing is so weird.
Right. It really is.
Can you tell a big difference? Have you noticed? Do you have any results of if there's a big difference between somebody who eats the regular way, 3 times a day in snacks, versus those who do the intermittent fasting, versus those who just do the 1 meal a day, the OMADs? Did you see any difference with that?
That's a great question. I love that. Yes, and I'll talk about it in the context of when I was doing these tests, because when the pandemic of 2020 happened, as you said in the introduction, my wife and I started Boundless Body because we were unemployed by this company, and yeah, based on the pay structure, we would have had a really hard time surviving when they opened back up again. So we had to start our own business. And so I haven't actually used these metabolic carts since March of 2020. They actually shut my program down even before the gyms closed down because we were dealing with respirations. And so I already lost the thing that I do in my program and everything. So that was quite traumatic. And then the shutdown happened. But anyway, I'll talk about the context back, before when I was doing these tests. Intermittent fasting, my exposure to intermittent fasting was only really starting through like the middle part of 2019 when more people were doing it. And I definitely understood that it would increase people's metabolisms. And finally finding the work of Dr. Jason Fung, who explains a lot about fasting, was like, oh, he's explaining these mechanisms. This makes a lot of sense. I'm understanding this a lot better. So I can't really answer as far as like OMAD versus a different feeding window or whatever. It was just way too new for me to be able to play with that and like validate that on these assessments. I have a hunch of what that would do for people, but it's only a guess. You mentioned the person railroading the food. This is something that was really ironic that we would actually use to help somebody even recover their metabolism. So we described earlier, the woman typically happens to men too. It has happened to me, that are under eating and they're over exercising and they're freezing cold and their weight loss is plateaued and their cravings are going through the roof. And again, like cold to the point of like wearing a jacket in July kind of a thing.
Yeah.
The way that you could recover that in a person was uncomfortable and it required weight gain in most cases. But if you gave that person a ton of calories, again, they would gain weight because their metabolism would be here and you're feeding them now this much. But if I started giving those people milkshakes, hamburgers, French fries, not the best health food, but big calorie bombs, eventually that would increase your metabolic rate and eventually cause a weight loss because you're reversing the process that created the weight gain. You can actually ramp up somebody's metabolic rate doing that. In 2014, I had a really stressful personal thing happen. I didn't eat as much. I wasn't eating the same way that I am now, but what I would have called healthy back at the time. My body fat dropped. I got really, really lean, and then started to notice that metabolic slowdown of like my energy sucks. I'm feeling really cold. I wasn't eating enough. It tanked my metabolism and I had to start overeating my calories and it was uncomfortable. I got up to the biggest that I've ever been, nearly 200 pounds. None of my clothes fit. So that sucked, but I did recover my metabolism and started to teach my body to burn more energy all the time. The fasting mechanism, it's just interesting because it turns the question of calories less from the calories that you consume versus the calories that you have already previously consumed that are stored on the body. And so it's like, do calories matter? It's like, I don't think that calories matter in the way that people say they do. But also knowing that you can take calories from stored fat or from food means that you could be in a caloric deficit because you're not eating as much, but you're burning so many calories from stored fat as well. It's a different way to think about it. So yeah, that was one of the more interesting things we learned with using that tool.
Yeah. And that's what's so neat when you finally tell somebody and they finally agrees, like, okay, I'm going to try this, intermittent fasting, start doing it in a little window and everything. And because everybody, before you do this, everybody thinks, oh my gosh, I get hungry the way it is now. If I have to go another 2, 3, 4 hours, I'm going to be starving to death. And then I'm just going to eat everything. Yeah, and you find out, my blood sugar is just going to drop to nothing. If I have to eat carbs, keep my blood sugar up and all this stuff. Yeah. And then you find out, no, that's not how the body works. And then when they finally catch on, and just like you said, they feel better, they're happy with themselves, they have energy, their fat is coming off, so their weight's coming down. And so you mentioned Jason Fung, and that was the very, very first book that I read that started opening all my eyes to all this nutrition. I thought, what is he talking about? This is exact opposite of that we've been taught, not that we've been taught that much, going all the way through school. I mean, I went to college for 12 years. I was never taught this kind of stuff, So it's neat when you learn it. It makes perfect sense, and you tell people, and then they start getting the same results. And you're like, yes.
Oh, it's amazing. Like again, what it's like to be a doctor, and you're giving people stuff that is making them, sicker or is unnecessary, and then all of a sudden you start helping people. It was the greatest thing in my career. Is like, you hired me to help you and you're getting help. Like, it's just in a different way. It's so funny though. Like in my whole nutrition manual, this big thick textbook that I'm, told to read, there's basically one sentence and then a paragraph later on in the book that talks about what happens when you burn fat as fuel and what ketones are. And that's it. If this book had the one study done by George Cahill in the 70s talking about like fasting, what happens to the body when you fast somebody for 40 days and what energy sources change and how much gluconeogenesis you need and then you don't need anymore, how the body adapts to fatty acids and ketones. If you had just that one study in this entire book, you would know more about human metabolism than all the other crap that I had to learn that's in there anyway. And I still have to read it to pass it off every 2 years. Yeah. And it's like, we're missing such huge understandings in science and biology of how our body works. It's a shame that is largely lost. It takes the fantastic study and writing, and I would say like the sarcasm and kind of the snarkiness of a Dr. Jason Fung to bring that truth back out to us. I really appreciate.
So you take that test every 2 years and you have to pass.
In order to be certified as a nutrition coach, yes, I've got to take that test every 2 years. It's not a terribly difficult test. It's more that I need to read the textbook to get the answers that I know they want.
Exactly. That's what I mean. The answers they want.
Yeah.
Right.
A lot of it is, your standard stuff. This is like, I would say, probably the most well-respected and probably well-known nutrition certification out there. It's a lot of like how to portion things and like using your hand as a guide to know like, oh, this is one portion of fat and this is one portion of vegetables, which is like a cupped hand. And here's how you mix these servings. In the back of the book, it's more advanced stuff, like how you can shred for like a competition or how to get your electrolytes balanced and all that stuff. But at the core level, it was all behavior change. And this is something that, we've kind of already talked about, but Jason Fung alludes to as well, is like blaming the victim. Like there's so many different things that we would give people for behavior change that it was so easy to do nutrition coaching with somebody because you could always find something that these people did not do. Like, are you eating until you're 80% full? Are you eating a wide variety of vegetables, maybe 5 different vegetables every single day? Did you eat lean protein with every single meal? Lean protein. Did you write in your food journal about your feelings about food this week? And so like nobody could do it. And so everybody failed. And so you could always just go in circles and find the thing that they didn't do and just be like, oh, this is why you didn't do it. You know what I mean?
Right.
They offered, and I'll admit, this is a very well done program that they put together. They offered a program for their nutrition coaches. I had to pay out of my own pocket to do it. And it was an online program. So every day, people who signed up would get a lesson. You'd have a habit that you were working on for 2 weeks, whether it was one of those things we already mentioned, getting a variety of vegetables, whatever. And then, there'd be lessons, there could be workouts. And at the end of, the week or so, they could report in on how they did. They would take a weight or whatever. And the curriculum would run for an entire calendar year. And so, again, the amount of work that it would have taken to put together this program and daily lessons for 365 days out of the year was quite a lot. And it looked good. It was clean. It was a good platform. People understood how to, get it. They would start off with this guide that would be like personalized for them and exactly their correct portion sizes based on, their body type, their current weight, the gender, and what their goals were. I put hundreds of people on this program when I first got certified. There were two people out of hundreds of people that finished this curriculum and finished the very last day and actually did the entire program. I didn't even do it for myself, and I was obsessed with nutrition. And so, it's just so different, this paradigm. But nutrition coaching, to get somebody on a nice recurring business of nutrition coaching, I could see you every 6 weeks and always find something to blame it on.
Yeah.
So different than the way we work now.
And thank goodness we work differently now.
Yeah, right. I can sleep at night. I like that.
Yeah.
It is weird. You were talking about how you feel like you're helping more people now. That's how I feel too. It's like I've only been retired for 3 years now, and I get emails from people, I get texts from people, people are always contacting me talking about, how happy they are that finally they've realized how to lose weight the healthy way. And I had a friend of mine from high school, which I graduated in 1980, so this was a while back, and he texted me, probably last month. And he actually got a hold of me when he was still in the doctor's office because he had started this. We had talked a little bit about it a year ago. And so he got his pre-labs. And then I didn't really hear that much from him for the whole year. And he was so excited. He texted me. He was still in the doctor's office, just got the labs, and said, I want you to see what these labs did. And he got the lab, and everything came down perfect. Everything looked good. All his markers looked good. And he said the doctor looked at him and said, So are you cutting out all the red meat and you eating more fruits and vegetables? And he goes, no, actually I'm doing the exact opposite. I'm eating almost all red meat and just very, very few vegetables and just staying away from all the man-made food. He's like, this is amazing. Go out and tell your friends, because he worked out with the same friends, and the doctor is a friend of his. And so he knew these friends too. He's like, go tell them what you're doing. He said, this is crazy.
That's
I just love when people do that. Yeah. It's like, yes, once you open the eyes.
Yeah. And totally just lights you up.
And just like you did this last week, we have continuing education credits also that we have to do. We have to do them every year or every 2 years. But that's what I did one. I think it was yesterday or the day before. It was this last week, and it was on nutrition. And oh God, it just made me cringe going through. And
Goodness.
every single answer you're putting is like, this is not true. This is not true. But that's what they wanted for the answer. And so at the end of it, I just gave
his little personal opinion.
Yeah, get my personal
Nice.
opinion on because you're supposed to do an evaluation after every one of those. So I just evaluate them and let them know they might want to get to the new information and quit using food marketing techniques that try to explain to people why that's actual nutrition.
We'll see if he still can be a pharmacist.
That's right. That's right.
Great question. Yeah, I did that at the end of a personal training certification, not my primary one, but a secondary one that I got. I did that once. I don't know how kindly it was received. So.
There was something else you were wanting to ask him, something that you had heard on the podcast.
Well, one of the things you talked about was, do you feel like fasting? Because Steve does a lot of one meal a day. Like he waits until 4 or 5 o'clock, something like that, and he eats. And then we're like, you start hearing all these people talk about eating, getting all that protein in. And it's like, so then we're like, okay, maybe he should eat more. Do you feel like, because you had kind of made a comment that you weren't really seeing, nobody was losing muscle if they were just eating 1 meal a day?
Yeah, I love this question. And that's the fun thing is like, I'm not a huge proponent of testing everything all the time. But when you do have tools that you can use, like a body fat scale, you get to validate certain things and see what's going on, especially when you're collecting data from, large groups of people. You can really start to see some patterns. Again, correlation is not causation, but if you've got a lot of patterns going, you can start to see stuff. And so right off the bat, like when we were back with this big corporate gym, they would run a 2-month weight loss contest that was terrible. It didn't work for hardly anybody. That like 15% of people who started the contest would finish the contest. So the compliance was really low. It was, hundreds of pages of packets of meal plans and tons of ingredients that people would have to go buy at the store and just all this crap that people had to do. And as trainers, we were forced to run the programs and sign up people under us to be able to take them through the program. And it just failed and failed and failed. And every 3 months, you had to go find new people and new people and new people. So when my wife and I first had our first person who really kicked off this whole thing for us as far as like, what is a keto diet? We had a guy who I could recognize as I did his initial consultation that he just was not eating any fat or protein. So I just told him to get some more fat and protein in his diet. He came back in a few days and said, I've already lost a few pounds. What is this keto stuff? And that was like the day that like, I don't know, let's go learn about keto. And I basically have not stopped. And so when we were doing these weight loss contests, my wife and I decided to give people alternate meal plans that were low carb and just told people, don't worry about the other stuff the company's giving you. Try these ones, eat these meals, whatever looks good, do them like as many calories as you like. Don't even count calories. Just have taco bowls or pizza with a low carb crust or these, salads that were in there. Find enjoyable ones that you like and just eat them until you're really full and let's see what happens. And we used a body fat scale and we did that. We ended up doing 6 cycles of this where we would refine this program that basically gave these people the same thing. And we learned that we had a much higher compliance percentage, closer to about 65% of people would finish the contest when we did it this way. And 732 total pounds were lost during these contests. And only and 720 of those pounds actually came from fat. So only less than 12 pounds of 732 pounds were coming from anything other than fat. Anything other than fat, not just muscle, but lean mass, water, bone density, like you name it. It could have been anything. And so again, not the perfect trial, but it was enough to say like these people are eating in a certain way and a large group of these people are losing exclusively fat. Whereas a personal trainer, I was used to seeing weight loss be like, yeah, you lost fat, but you also lose some muscle, you lose some bone density. You might see about a 50-50 split between fat loss and losing everything else you might not want to lose. So right off the bat, I noticed that like at least eating that way would be pretty great for just losing fat, let alone all the other things that they were telling us as far as these amazing benefits. They were feeling great. They were not using the bathroom as much. Their brain was turning on more and they didn't need naps anymore. And just all these weird, unexplainable things that people were describing.
And not hungry. That's big when people say, yeah, they're like, I'm used to being hungry all the time. And now once I started eating more meat and fat, said, I'm not hardly ever hungry.
I'm not that hungry. And so
Yeah.
then exactly, if somebody's not hungry, well, then they're not eating as much. And it's not that they're eating less calories per se. It's just that they're not hungry in the morning. So now they're doing some type of form of intermittent fasting.
Right.
And I'm not telling them to, it's just natural. It's what I do. It's what Steve does. If it doesn't sound good to eat more than once a day and you have really good energy, like, okay, that's pretty good. And so over the years, I ended up buying my own scale that I use with my clients. And it's just something that it makes sense when people say it. I hear the thing about protein, like it's way better to break up your doses of protein to be at least 30 grams every time you get it, but you want to make sure that you have several boluses during the day so you have enough leucine to trigger muscle protein synthesis. That makes a lot of sense to me. It makes sense that you could consume more calories by eating 2 or 3 times a day versus eating just one. There's the increase in calories, again, boosts the metabolic rate. That makes sense to me.
Right.
But when I'm looking at it just practically, like what I'm seeing, what I'm noticing, what I'm observing is that I'm not seeing people do fasting and have any kind of like lean mass loss, muscle loss in particular. It's things that people have been measuring on the same scale for months or years. Like you would think at some point you'd start to see a decline that would never return. And like, yeah, I just never see it. I've got a client that I train. I help him with the nutrition side. He sees another trainer to do the exercise side. And we don't always see eye to eye on certain things nutritionally, but the guy has been diagnosed type 2 diabetes and, really wants to lose fat. And so through this journey, I've been telling him, eating a low carbohydrate diet, start intermittent fasting. His trainer's giving him pushback and saying, like, if you fast, you're going to lose muscle. We're working to get your muscle, like you're going to lose it. They've literally stepped on a body fat scale, a very reliable one, week after week after week after week. He sends me the report every week, and he has not lost any muscle. And he's doing 1 meal a day fasting. And it's like, why did your trainer not recognize he's seeing the numbers every single week and the muscle mass is stable, the same?
Yep.
It's exactly the same. This is not happening. Is it going to happen next week? Maybe, but it hasn't happened for 4 years before this. Like,
right.
So it's just something that I don't see. Again, when people explain that, like, you shouldn't fast, you can overfast. I have overfasted on carnivore in particular, where I went a good year, maybe year and a half, where I would say deliberately bypassing my hunger cues. And I was eating 1 meal a day late in the day, mostly just ribeye steak. And this took a while, but after about a year and a half, 2 years, I started to notice some of the classic signs that I mentioned earlier. My hands and feet started to get really, really cold. My cravings came up. I was adding more body fat than I like, especially in my midsection. And I was able to recognize, like, yeah, I might be slowing down my metabolic rate. Maybe I should add in a second meal. And I was pretty consistent with that for a long time. And I recovered all of that stuff. And now I just feel like it kind of ebbs and flows for me personally, where like today, very busy, a lot of stuff I've been doing. I'm not going to get to food. I have food ready for me. I'm just not going to get to it. So it's no mad day for me. Other days I might feel hungrier, or I might have time, a break in my day where I can get to it. And that's great. So really just depends. But yeah, practically speaking, Theresa, it's a really great question, but it's not something that I ever really tend to see.
Now I thought that was really interesting. So
Do you think some of the part of people who go to the intermittent fasting, when they actually realize how important the nutrition is and how important meat and fat are, do you think that has much to do with the fact that people who are doing this aren't losing much protein? Because people who just eat carbs all the time, which is most people that hold standard American diet, our bodies need protein. It needs amino acids. I mean, we make 20,000 different proteins. I mean, we've got to have the amino acids. So if the people are doing the intermittent fasting, if they're eating the meat, do you think that's why one that keeps you satiated for much longer, so you can do that? But by eating the meat, do you think that's why we're giving us the protein, so those people aren't having the muscle breakdown like the people who mainly eat carbs? That's why they have the muscle breakdown, or do you think there's something else in there?
That's a great question. I'll give you my thoughts on it, and I would love to hear your opinion about it as well, and see if this kind of makes sense. When your body is in a carbohydrate fed state, and think about this like chronically, like obviously you eat a meal of pasta, like you're going to be burning pasta and the carbohydrate calories from that meal for a while. Eventually you don't eat the pasta, maybe you're sleeping, your insulin falls, and then your body learns, okay, let's get up all the energy and fat that we stored when we had too much of it in the blood and had to store it away. So in a normal state, that wouldn't be catastrophic for most people if it was done from time to time. You'd activate an emergency system in your body and it would deal with the emergency, which is high blood sugar, and then get you back down to a baseline. It's just when people do that chronically, now the only fuel that their body is used to burning is carbohydrate and sugar. So they're hungry all the time. The blood sugar is swinging all the time. When you get the high, you feel great. When you get the low, you feel terrible and you feel hungry. So of course you're going to have more carbohydrates because that's the only fuel your body can burn. And in that state, your body uses what is called gluconeogenesis. Glucose, neo, new, genesis, creation. Gluconeogenesis. And you can create glucose out of things. Your body can like repackage different things. Like, so you're talking about like protein. In a blood sugar crash, when the insulin is trapped away sugar and is storing it, or either trying to burn what little it has, your body might be freeing up protein in your body to then be broken down to be used for the very high amount of gluconeogenesis that you need, because you need so much of it because your body's burning so many calories from carbohydrates. So so your body needs all those amino acids. We know the protein leverage hypothesis states that your body's going to keep wanting food and keep eating until you get enough protein that you need for the day, which I think is pretty clear evidence if you ever grab a bag of chips and salsa and you can basically eat that entire bag of chips and salsa and be hungry at the end. That happened to me when I do that.
Thank goodness that doesn't work with Oreos.
Exactly. Totally. So people might be over consuming a lot of food because they're lacking the protein that they need. They could be having blood sugar issues because the body is, wasting, using calorie or carbohydrates as fuel and then using a high amount of protein to make more sugar, which then, yes, maybe that person is losing lean mass and muscle mass in that process. When the body changes over to being better at burning fat, your body's using fat as a substrate. You eat proteins and fats, which means, yes, you become very, very satiated. If you've ever been to a Brazilian steakhouse or a hot pot, one of my favorite places to go, they bring out endless amounts of meat. And I go and I think like, oh my goodness, I'm going to be here for 12 hours. This is going to be amazing. I'm going to eat all their food. They're going to beg me to leave this place. I think you're going to be there all afternoon. And it's like 45 minutes. You can't even look at the food anymore. You're so stuffed. It's delicious. And I know tomorrow I'm going to be like, what the hell was your problem, man? Why didn't you eat endless amounts when you could have? But at the time, the hormones that told my body that I had enough are so powerful that you stop. You can't have any more. The number of frustrating times I've been like eating a steak and I've got like 2 bites to go and I just want to kill this steak so I don't have to store it or feed it to the dogs. The dogs are quite happy that I have those hormones because they end up with their food. So you get that signal that you're very full. Your body's burning fat as a fuel source. So now the need for burning carbohydrate drops so very low. We know that your body will always need some. Like no matter how low carb you go, your blood sugar needs to be stable. It can't be zero or you die. Your red blood cells, parts of the kidney, parts of the brain all need a little bit of sugar, but it's such a reduced amount that your body can make it gluconeogenesis from other things, including why would it waste the protein, especially muscle protein, when it's got fat and can use fat to break down for energy and then use the glycerol to provide the teeny amount of sugar that you then need. Jason Fung was another great example of somebody who made me understand this when he said, like, if you have a stocked wood pile back behind your cabin, you wouldn't necessarily probably think it would be a good idea to chop up your sofa and your kitchen table and all your cabinets inside the house to use for a fire. If that has a function, it's helping you. Like maybe at the very end, you could do that if you really needed a fire, but you have fuel in the form of wood that's already chopped. It's for that purpose. And that's what fat is for us. We can store tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of calories of fat that is an energy source that our body can burn. And I think in that state, it kind of makes sense that yes, you'd preserve muscle mass. No, we never see it on a scale that somebody's losing muscle mass when they're doing fasting. And they can maintain that little amount of gluconeogenesis just with the small amount of substrates it's already taking and recycling inside the body. That's kind of the way I think about it. If that answers your question, what do you think?
Same way. And then it makes you look at how we were born. If you are using carbohydrates, just like you said, if you're using carbohydrates for your main energy source, you're going to get drained really quick. What, 10% of your liver is all there is of glycogen. And even the 1% that's in your skeletal muscles is only good for that one skeletal muscle. So you can't even really use that.
It's very local.
And so that's what's neat, is thinking that if you teach your body to use fat, we call that dining in, because you already have the energy on board. So you're eating your own fat. You don't get hungry. And Ken Berry was talking about that he always tells everybody about just eat beef, bacon, butter, and eggs. Just eat beef, bacon, butter, and eggs for a month and just see. And he had a lot of people that were eating that, and they were getting kind of sick because they're so used to having carbohydrates that don't keep them hungry or keep them full. So they're eating like every 3-4 hours. Well, now that's a habit they're doing. So they think every 3 hours they need to go eat more meat and fat. And they couldn't hardly do it, and they felt horrible. But they, just like you said, they self-regulated. They thought, oh, it's a habit that I'm eating all the time. But once you key into your body, it's like, oh, I'm not even hungry. And when you do that, like you said, you've got the fat on board. You always have the fat, and it makes you a lot more metabolic and flexible, because you could burn your fat. I kind of use it like a campfire. That's what I did in one of my talks. It's like a campfire, and the kindling would be like the glucose, and the great big logs would be like the fire. So you can't just have a bunch of kindling and burn all this kindling over and over and over and over again, and then all of a sudden take this great big log and throw it on the fire and expect it to burn. It's not going to do it.
Yeah.
However, if you're already got a fire going and you throw a great big log on the fire and it's burning, then if you want to throw your kindling on, it'll just burn the kindling down and go right back to burning the big log, which is what we're supposed to be doing, is using our fat that we've had since the beginning of time, since God made us. We have fat all over our bodies, or subcutaneous. Now it's all over our bodies. It's supposed to only be in our subcutaneous tissues, but now that people are doing this constantly, they're filling up all their fat tissue, and now it's starting to store around their organs. And that's when we're seeing that's when they're so far behind that by the time they get diagnosed as diabetes, like, oh, you have type 2 diabetes. It's like, oh, they've had type 2 diabetes for the last 20, 30 years as the insulin resistance kept going up and up and up. They're just now seeing it. But by then, now you're talking about, now you got fat all over your organs, and now diseases are just going to start popping and over. You're going to have skin conditions, Alzheimer's, cancer, high blood pressure. I mean, everything starts rolling in there. So, I mean, if you just look at the way we were made from the beginning, it only makes sense that fat was always supposed to be our main energy source. It's just until our guidelines came out when they were telling everybody, ooh, eating fat's going to make you fat, and it just, and it's killed us. That stupid information there has killed us.
I couldn't agree more. I always marvel at this every summertime. So at the time of this recording, it's getting to be the end of summertime. Things are ripening. You know what I mean? Like, plants are growing. I walk around my neighborhood every single day. And there's just such a vast quantity of different plants growing everywhere. And there's so many different varieties of shrubs and grasses and trees and like all this stuff. I know in my neighborhood where the fruit trees are, there's a few that grow naturally. They're not quite ready yet, but they will be in a little while. I'm in the Salt Lake Valley where a garden tomato is just so good. Really, really good. And then, you get the fruit trees and you see these little apples, and they look nothing like an apple you get at the store. And, some of them have been eaten by bugs and other things already. So already lost the competition. But there's just, you walk around, it's warm, it's been raining, and so things are growing. It's prime growing season, and there's just such a tiny amount that you could eat if you wanted to eat off of the land and rely on carbohydrates as your fuel source. It's just not really an option to us. Like, if you wanted to do some agriculture and grow a bunch of grains, that you'd have, a commodity grain at the end. But what if there's a drought? Where are you going to store it? Who gets more, who gets less? Like, there's so many different questions and complexities with how we eat. The only thing that ever makes sense is that we've always been reliant on fats and proteins. We, as a species, had to make a decision. Were we going to run as a species on fat and therefore be reliant on animal products? Or do we need to go towards the plant side and eat lots of plants? And just the way our digestion is, their mouths are, and there's just so much support. And beyond all of the support and research and what we've shown with all these studies that are done by archaeologists, it's just common sense. Like, you can't just go out and find endless amounts of sugar and honey and apples and all these things available all the time. You get them from time to time. And when you get them seasonally, your body's going to reward you for having them. And you should eat a lot of them, because it's a tiny amount of the year. You need those carbohydrates to store the fat. You need to fatten up because it's going to be winter. there's a really sad day every year around here. I eat mostly carnivore, but tomatoes. I'm telling you, these tomatoes are really, really good. And if you've ever had a garden, you know how much work it is to maintain a garden. You only get a few tomatoes at the end, but they're really good. And so there's people in my neighborhood every year, they start a garden, they abandon it when it gets really difficult to garden in the middle of the year. And then there's just at the end of the year, there's a few tomatoes laying around. If they're on the ground and not somebody's active garden, I'll pick them and maybe throw them in some cottage cheese, and they're so good. And there's always a sad day where like there's a hard freeze. It doesn't matter how much I want tomatoes. I could really, really, really want tomatoes. There's no tomatoes. That option is now gone. It's out of my control. I could go to the store and buy a cardboard tomato. Those are disgusting. But like, it's not an option for me. Now I have to wait 10 more months, 10 and a half more months if I want to do that again. It's just like you said, man, like it just would not have been possible for us to run our bodies fully on carbohydrate. It activates again an emergency response in the body that says we have way too much blood sugar. Get this out now. I don't care what happens in 40 years. I care about this emergency problem inside my arteries right now. Get this stuff out of here. Right. That is supposed to activate exceedingly rarely, very, very, very rarely. And now forget tomatoes and apples. Like we have ultra processed food that is so utterly delicious and amazing and is ultra palatable and is available at your hardware store or a gas station or the kids selling it down the street. You have it when you're sad or when you're happy. You have it when you're stressed or when you're relaxed. Like it's everywhere and it's killing us. It is absolutely destroying us. And yet we go back and blame the fat, like you said, and we make recommendations that are so bogus. It's just maddening.
I know.
Crazy.
And just like you said, it's like when the fruits and vegetables, when they're in season, then that's when you can eat them and eat a lot, because you got to turn all those carbohydrates into fat. And so many people, I don't think they even realize that carbohydrates get turned into fat. They think, I'm eating all these carbs and I go walking, so I burn up all the calories that those carbs brought in. It's like, you're not even coming close to burning up the amount of calories that you're taking in. And that's the fact. Your body thinks that you're giving it the food that it needs. So it just says, oh, I've got a bunch of carbohydrates. You must be wanting me to start stuffing in my fat cells. And so it does. And so every time people eat all these carbs, you are actually, because of insulin, insulin is the main reason. Glucose, all carbs, all plant-based foods, carbs, they all have a basic building block of glucose. You put a plant-based food in your mouth, your insulin levels are going to go up. When your insulin levels go up, you cannot burn your own fat. The only thing you can do is store fat. So, I think people still don't realize, I don't know why I keep gaining weight every single year, as they're sitting there munching on a bag of chips or Oreos or whatever it is. And I think that's another part of the knowledge that people aren't being told, that glucose gets turned into fat in the liver, as triglycerides. And so all the excess that you're doing, you're not burning it off by walking from your car to the door or whatever people tend to do.
Yeah, that's right.
How do you, since you've been having a lot of clients, is there any certain pathway that you go with as far as trying to convert people from the standard American diet over to a healthy way of eating?
That's a great question. I'm very fortunate in the position that I'm at that I have people that are already knowing what I do and are kind of self-selecting. So they when they come to me, there's not a lot of convincing that I have to do. There's definitely coaching and help with certain things, but generally speaking, there's very little convincing that I need to do. There is with some people, like we get pushback from family members and friends sometimes, or somebody online. And so, I also have, I've got a client who very early on, I told him what I do as a nutrition coach. He hired me for personal training, and we have been training for 2 years, but he told me in the beginning, I'm a vegetarian. I'm on a statin. He's in his 30s. He's on a statin and a blood pressure medication, but he's already eating the diet that he wants to be eating. So that has been a non-starter. But, again, I've been able to personal train him for the last 2 years. So we still have good rapport, and hopefully one day I can, convince him otherwise. But yeah, there's not a lot of convincing that I have to do. The place I usually start with most people is just, for once in your life, stop focusing on the things you can't have and just focus on, get full, eat food that makes you be really, really satiated. You may have gone your entire life hungry, your entire life, not feeling satiated. why don't you give yourself permission to have a big old plate of eggs? Maybe
Yep.
just have a steak. If you want to have a side, go for it. But like, you don't have to have sides. You could just order a big steak and don't stop until you feel really full.
Yep.
Go to that Brazilian steakhouse and like just stay there until you don't want to eat anymore and you want to leave. See how you feel and just focus on that. Don't worry so much about the things you can't have. Um, and I feel like that helps at least get people like, wow, I'm satiated, I'm full, I'm less hungry. This feels really nice. Maybe some people might want to proceed past that and continuing lower their carbohydrates to, a ketogenic level, or maybe even if it's temporarily like a carnivore level where you're experiencing what life is like for a little while, where you're not consuming any plants.
Right.
Some people tolerate them just fine. Other people like the experiment, like I did, and kind of keep going. And I've done it for several years now. But I really just try to start with like, let's focus on the fats and proteins. You're not going to die. You're going to be fine. What they've told you is a lie, and it's on purpose. So you're not going to die. So just what sounds good as far as fats and proteins, they come together naturally in nature. So if fish, chicken, beef, whatever you like for now is great. Let's just eat a lot of that, and that tends to at least get people down the right trail as far as like, okay, I'm going in the right direction. I feel good. No, I'm not increasing my weight. I don't feel like I'm dying of a heart attack. I was able to poop eventually. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
everything's going to be
That's
fine.
a big deal right there. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. So just so you know, real quick, you are the only other person that I know of that eats cottage cheese and tomatoes.
Ah, really?
Yes. I tell people because I grew up
She does.
eating those. Yeah, he
Okay.
doesn't. Yeah. You're the first person that has
Funny.
ever said that. Yeah.
Oh,
Well,
that's
anyway,
funny.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's not a huge staple of mine. I don't do the best with
Right.
dairy,
Right.
but it is very tasty. I usually
Yeah.
have some on hand. So yeah,
Right.
it's cool.
Yeah.
Nice.
So as far as what you do, like teaching people about nutrition and things, what do you do? Do you train people online, or you just, it kind of sounded like you were seeing people in person, like
Yeah.
weighing them and
Yeah, I would have answered you very differently a few years ago before the pandemic, where personal training was, I mean, I had never heard of virtual personal training outside of like program design where you're sending a program to somebody. Um, Pandemic happened and we had to get real creative with our people. And so, yes, we offer both in-person and virtual training. I work with people all over the world, including with people that I've never met in person. We've trained since the pandemic, and we do, virtual sessions where I take them through different exercises, and it's awesome. Both work really well. I even have people that live in my same valley that it's just inconvenient to travel. My schedule doesn't really permit me to travel to them, and they can't really come out to me. So we, even in the same valley, use virtual sessions, and they were great. I try to see them in person all the time. I prefer that. I really like to get to know my people. It's no exaggeration to say, once you work with somebody for a little while, these clients are like your best friends and your family.
I
Like
bet.
you laugh together and cry together. It happened to me today where a client had something very stressful going on and broke into tears, and I'm one of the very few people he can share that with. We
Yeah.
get very, very close with our people. So yeah, we do either way, whether we work in person, virtually. Just kind of depends on what somebody needs. Same with like the level of nutrition coaching somebody wants or needs, whether they want to discuss that or whether they just want to do exercise. We can do that. We also do, things where we help people like endurance sports and like training programs for that. We write up programs for people that they can do if they're like lifting weights, and has different like exercises that people can do. And, we recommend sets and reps and how to modify that over time. And so, yeah, it just, again, during the pandemic, we had to get very, very creative and pragmatic on how we were working with people. And at this point, I've trained people through the screen of my phone. I've also trained people on banisters of their stairs and in so many unfinished basements and on trees and all kinds of weird
That's
places.
awesome.
Like we can figure it out.
Yeah, that's cool. I like that.
So if somebody wants to hire you, wants to see what you're all about, how can they get a hold of you? How can they figure it out? Find this out?
Yeah. The best place to go is just our website, which is myboundlessbody.com. That's kind of our central hub where we keep most things. One of the first things they'll see is a book now button where people can schedule a session with us. It's 30 minutes. We don't charge anything. It's very often that
Nice.
session drifts past 30 minutes and we just get talking and have a really good time. So that's the best thing to do. It's just like, let's chat things out. You may find the 30-minute consultation, you're already going away with a few tips and tricks and things that will set you on the right direction. It's same like you and your neighbor, or I'm sorry, your former high school buddy,
Right.
where like you did one consultation, you never heard from the person again. I'll often follow up with somebody in 3 months, be like, yo, like you must have fallen off the wagon. How'd it go? They're like, oh no, we're thriving. This is great.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
awesome.
Yeah.
They didn't have to pay me a penny. So
Yeah.
That's right.
fantastic. So that's what you can do there. That's what we offer. We also have our podcast, which you can find there. You have all our social media stuff. And then this summer, I've been teaching a series all about nutrition in my neighborhood. And I've been putting all the recordings of that onto Zoom, onto Facebook. Or I'm sorry, not Facebook, YouTube. So people can see every lesson, all the outlines I've made, free meal plans, articles, all kinds of stuff, and all the full videos are there if people want to access those. They're all sectioned out by what you want to learn about. So yeah, so that's the main hub, is myboundlessbody.com is our website, and you can find us there. And yeah, we can start with the consultation and make sure we're a good fit and see what works moving forward.
No, that's great.
That sounds fantastic. We're gonna be getting a hold of you.
We're here, man.
Okay. Well, thank you for being on our show. I mean, we just enjoy this every time.
Oh, we just love getting
Both
together with you.
times.
You're always so awesome to be with.
Yeah.
You really are.
Yeah, a lot of
Well,
fun.
thank you. I'm so grateful that we had that chance meeting where we all got to meet and
Yeah.
sit next to each other. It was just so wonderful to meet you guys. And the number of conversations we've had now where the hour just flies by. It goes so much fast. It's so fun and interesting. And I love your energy and passion. And yeah, thank you for hosting me. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah, absolutely.
Hey, same with you. Thank you so much, very, very much, for everything you did, all the information you give our people.
Thank you.
So,
It's been an honor.
So that'll be it for today. And as always, thank you so much for listening to our program. And for those of you going on YouTube, for watching our program. Have a great week. And remember, always, always make simple, healthy choices to live a quality life.